Encounter is brought to you by the Broome County Council of Churches, where we connect compassion with needs as we inspire growth with dignity. You'll find us in special places throughout the community. For those who remain hungry, we provide meals. For those who are challenged, we build wheelchair ramps. We comfort those who are ill, minister to those who are confined, and we remain an advocate for change and understanding on behalf of every element of our community. Connect and inspire. Encounter the Broome County Council of Churches.
Well, good morning and welcome to Encounter. I'm your host today, Joe Sellepack. It's kind of hard to be a host amongst all hosts, but we are all here together as we are often when we have 5 Sundays within the month. And today we're going to talk a little bit about Thanksgiving. So I have our host, Rachel Helgeson, Mark Kimpland, and Jeff Kellam, all pastors, all from Presbyterian churches and the other one from a United Methodist church, and I'll round it off by being another United Methodist pastor. So we're grateful to be here today and to talk about Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is going to look a little different this year if we go by all the CDC guidelines and all of the things from the governor's office, where I usually am with about 24 or 25 other people inside of a basement at someone's house, and that will not be happening this year. A lot of us have changed, but the thought of Thanksgiving during COVID, what do you all think about that? What do we have to give thanks for? What should we be grateful for today? Jeff, do you want to start us off?
Sure, because I've given it so much thought. The thing that strikes me is that we have been talking about loss and grief and all the things that are missing in our lives. And we get it through the evening news, we get it through our conversations with people, we get it through our Zoom meetings. And it's good for us now to turn away from all the talk of loss and grief to what we still have. And people have talked about how we have marshaled different forces together to combat our loneliness or these Zoom gatherings that we have now do connect us still. And we still feel, especially if somebody from the church is calling folks at home to see how they're doing, maybe some of that has increased over this period of the past few months. We're doing more being in touch with people intentionally. So that's the first thing that strikes me, is that now it's time to kind of turn in this coming week, to the things that we still have, the blessings that we still count, the Thanksgiving that we have in our hearts for being alive and being able to take another breath. So that's my first thought.
Well, that's a good thought, Jeff. It's amazing to me that we sometimes forget the fact that we're on this side of the grass, and that it's important for us to be able to give thanks for yet another day to be in God's world. So it's a good thought. Rachel, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, so my congregation actually is working on Thanksgiving baskets, and usually we have an enormous number, but I think what's been amazing to me from hearing from the schools is that they've gotten such an outpouring from people trying to help.
Yeah.
Which makes me thankful that my congregation is part of a network of other congregations, other nonprofits. Like I know Broome County Council of Churches is doing something about that as well. My cat's decided to photobomb her.
You got to give thanks for the cat too.
Right,
Yeah.
give thanks for my cat. For those of you that are on the radio, I wanted to point that out because there was a little chuckle. So, but it has been pretty amazing, because usually, like we have a larger number, and what we've heard from the schools is that they've had an outpouring of people trying to make sure that everyone is fed this year and that everyone has the gift of Thanksgiving. And what a gift, right? That we don't have to, that there's a network of people saying we care about those we can't necessarily see or know, but there is enough. And I think that's one of the things that I've been really focusing on in my own personal devotions, but trying to talk about that with my congregation too, is what is enough? A lot of times we want more, but what's enough? And can we be thankful for enough? In this time of pandemic, we've certainly been forced to think about what we have and what we don't have. And if we think about what we have is enough, we can be thankful for that, you know? And what a beautiful thing that our community is coming together to give enough and to share. And that's been my big thing I've been doing. The other thing is that every day I've been doing a great gratitude on my social media account and what am I grateful for. It's really forced me to really pay attention. It's been an interesting practice. It's like a reverse Lenten practice for me to say, what am I grateful for? What is, some days it's something huge, like my kids got to school and they didn't fight. That's amazing, you know. But yesterday it was just something very simple, you know, about the snow and flowers, something very simple that I just didn't really pay as much attention to. So I hope others can, they don't necessarily have to do a gratitude practice like I'm doing right now, but just to consider what are the little things that are bringing you joy? What are the little things that are making you mindful? And where do you see God in that?
Yeah, it's an important thing for us to remember. Mark, how about you and your congregation? What's to be thankful for?
Two things come to mind. First, and Jeff and Rachel, I concur with everything you said, and we're kind of doing much of the same thing. But it's just very interesting, the dichotomy between perhaps the chaos and the things that we're leaving behind, but also searching for that order and peace and blessings and all of that. It's a real delicate balancing act, because we should not dismiss the pain, but live in that pain and through that pain. Darkness, light, all those kinds of theological perspectives that we bring to this time, I think is so rich, an opportunity for people to get deep and for us to go deep with our people and such. But one of the things that I began talking about, I think last Sunday, was what will be so interesting is when we are, and I'm confident we will be at some time on the other side of this. How will we react to things when we are? And the idea of never taking for granted those simple things, the touch, the handshake, the hug, the just simply being together, those kinds of things, because humanity at times is fickle. Where we go through times of tragedy and we rally together and we commit, and then when we're on the other side of that, it doesn't take very long to forget. And so we were discussing that last Sunday and such things, about the things that we take for granted, and may we never again take those things for granted. So it's been a unique opportunity to go deeper.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, Mark, because one of my friends who's a choral director said she's never going to take for granted singing with a group of people. Yeah. And I, as someone who was a singer, you know, and still loves to sing, I feel that deeply in my bones. I did just take it for granted. And so, and there's space for both feeling the sadness of that, but also the joy that whenever that does come back, like how amazing that will be, you know, to hear everyone's voices again. What you said really resonates with what I've been thinking about. Thank you.
Yeah, I've both of my children have actually tested positive right now. They're both in Rochester. They live together. So we just found out yesterday, and so that kind of dramatically changes our Thanksgiving plans. We were planning on having them to be around the table. We have our own little rituals that we do when we're together as a family, and you can imagine the pain that my wife is going through. She had the mama bear stuff going on yesterday, which is really, really hard. And you know, as a dad, I resonate with what you're saying as far as gratefulness and not taking things for granted. because you only hear the horror stories. I know that they're going to be fine. I know that they're going to, they're getting good medical treatment, and they're going to be able to be, they're both going to be fine. But, sitting back from it, I only hear the horror stories that resonate in my head, and you just can't be with them. You can't feel their presence. You can't touch them. You feel so powerless in the midst of all that. And so I have a lot of grief right now, and yet, every day I come into work, and you all know, we're getting some amazing gifts from people. We have 100 turkeys coming in for people that want to be able to give away turkeys. We have, I have thank you notes that I'm writing all the time for gifts that are coming in at this time of year, and it's just a real dichotomy. You feel the thankfulness, you feel the gratitude on the one hand, and then you also feel this deep grief at the same time, and they seem to be somewhat related to each other. And and as a pastor, I'm empathizing with my people a little bit more. What they're going through as far as their own life experience, and what the losses that they've experienced. Especially many of them are elderly, and they're in that category of where they are the most vulnerable population, and yet we need to somehow, in the midst of all of that, look for these little pieces of light that give us hope, and that drive us into life, and not get caught into the deep grief that sometimes can settle upon us. And so anyway, I resonate with what you were all saying today. And so for those people that are going through that kind of a transition within their planning or their thinking of Thanksgiving, how can we start looking at life a little bit differently, so that we can give thanks even in the midst of grief?
Well, certainly part of this is our dependence on one another, empathy and sympathy that tie us together, because we do have so much in common during this time. Joan, as we record this, is getting a COVID test right now. And as one who is vulnerable to, she's, because of her age and various medical things, it's frightening. And so, I think this idea of what we all have in common is that Thanksgiving will be different. The rituals, the gatherings will be different this year for many, if not most of us. So we have that in common, and we empathize with Joe and with others whose families are touched. None of us is immune from this disease. Even those who've had it may not be immune from it, and so we keep watch, and we have that in common. I think this idea of the commonality of the community taking care of one another. We hear over and over and over: wear a mask, keep a distance, don't gather in large gatherings, and so on. We have that assignment, that prescription in common. And then I think on that Thanksgiving Day, however we celebrate it differently this year, we can look at this sense of community that has developed. Unfortunately, not everyone is part of that community. We know that there are folks who are just refusing to admit this is a thing. And they may be gathered at our tables. It's not the case in my family, but I know some families have a hard time at Thanksgiving keeping away from certain topics. But nonetheless, here we are. We've got a meal, we've got a table, we've got a community, and for people of faith, that table is a huge, huge table.
Yeah. Yeah, we can talk a lot about the extending the table. There was actually a Mennonite book that was put together. It was a cookbook. It was called Extending the Table. And one of the reasons that I love that analogy of extending it is because we gather around it from a very diverse perspectives, and yet the common table is what kind of draws us. It's the common hunger that we all have for acceptance, for grace, for mercy, for love and gratitude, even, that kind of drive us to a table. And in spite of, and so you may have a relative who comes out from a different philosophical or political perspective, but yet somehow, in spite of that, they come to the table year after year. And why? Why do they come back for it? Is it just because they're a glutton for punishment, or is it because they find within that moment the spark of grace that they need? And I think that's part of what we all crave, is that grace that comes from that table. And so, I think about that a lot. It's one of the analogies that I bring up a lot in preaching, because it means a lot to me. So, how do we extend the table, Mark?
Well, I was reviewing some options for this Sunday, and one of them, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Skit Guys or not, but they're
so funny.
They're amazing. They're very theologically deep, comedic, all of that. And the one that I just reviewed real quickly was one of them at Thanksgiving Day, with all the irritating people that were surrounding him. The uncle who knows it all. And he goes through the entire house, pinpointing, this is so and so, and this is so and so, and you can see yourself in that picture. Because we all got the so and so's. We might be the so and so, and then at the end they go, this is my favorite time of Thanksgiving Day. And it was when he was taking the garbage out. And he takes the garbage out and he goes outside and he has a moment of peace from what's happening inside. So very grateful for what was happening inside, but even more grateful for taking a moment outside and being still.
Yeah.
And he said, my most favorite part of Thanksgiving is taking out the trash. And boy, there's lots of ways you can go with that, and maybe that's kind of what we're living through in this moment. That we have all of these things, but I have seen the blessing and the thanksgiving of slowing down, of being more aware. I just had a profound experience this morning. We have a mobile food distribution on Monday. So the community calls the office here. We have 2 people manning the phones on Friday morning. We begin at 7:30 and the phone's ringing off the hook. Well, I got to get ready for an encounter program. I got my desk full of things and the phone's ringing. I'm thinking, oh my Lord, this is crazy, until I stopped and remembered that each phone call is a person.
Mm. Yep.
And it was just a moment where I had to take the trash outside. And just say, all right, stop, breathe. There is goodness here, even in the midst of chaos.
And I was just going to say lightly, in the midst of all this chaos and the deep conversations and the differences we may share around the table, there's still that one eternal question: white meat or dark meat?
Yes.
Well, that works. So Rachel, how are you taking out the trash?
I was just thinking about I have a group that we are on a social media thing together, but we're all clergy. And one of the members of our group, she is single and hasn't had a hug in like 250 days. Yes, she has counted them. And her divorce happened on Zoom yesterday. And so she sent just sort of a I'm feeling terrible and I just want a pizza. Well, you know what? Like, she got like 3 pizzas from, and they came from all over the country, you know. She lives in Michigan, and there was one that came from Pennsylvania and another one that came from Florida. And, you know, and that's, even though we're separated, what is amazing to me is how people are using technology for good. I mean, and we always hear about the technology for bad, but I've sent stuff to people who've had things going on. You know, my brother-in-law sent me something through one of the local grocery stores because we were having a day with the kids, you know, and he couldn't physically be here, but it was something to show like, I'm still thinking about you and we still love you and we're connected. And so thinking the table is so much bigger, like that you can get a pizza in Michigan and be, you know, in Pennsylvania or Florida and send it to your friend, or your brother-in-law sends it to you from Kentucky from the grocery store. Like, our tables are a lot bigger, you know. And that, yeah, we're isolated in some ways, but if we can start to see how we can connect with people where they are, taking out the trash, answering the phone, seeing people in their pain, sending them air hugs, you know, I mean, it's not the same as thing, but you know, so I think there's something to humor in the midst of grief that we can, that's why they're intermingled, right? And my background's in theater, so I think about like how the masks are, it's both happiness and sadness. And you can't have comedy without tragedy, and you can't have tragedy without comedy. Like, it just doesn't work. So if you separate one out, then it's just not believable because it's not how life works out.
Or it comes across as a dad joke.
Yeah. Really.
Which, you know, there's places for that around the Thanksgiving table too.
There really, it really is, but it's part of the whole, you know, I don't know, darkness and light and the tapestry, I guess, of our lives that you need to have, that within any great painting, the shadows are important. And, you know, you find that in the midst of all of that, there is joy. And there's something that is beautiful that comes out of the intermingling of all of that. But for some people, it's going to be very difficult to see in the midst of this moment, you know, the intermingledness. You know, it's, you know, when you're walking in shadow, it's a very difficult thing. And so how do we help people who are caught in the midst of that darkness, to be able to experience, you know, a little bit of gratitude? I guess that's the point of the church, isn't it? So how do we walk with people in the midst of that?
Our prayers of gratitude on Thanksgiving Day or for every meal, we call them grace. And I don't mean to promote next week's program, but I will say next week that I'm not a big fan of making verbs out of nouns. But I think grace can be a verb. Grace has to be an active word. And so to grace one another, as far as I'm concerned, is one of the things we need to do. And that's part of I think, going back to the word empathy, but extending grace to people, not quite understanding their situation, not quite accepting who they are or what they think, but extending of kind of an no strings attached love that says, you're my brother and sister in some way, and so I'm going to extend this grace to you, and I hope that grace will return. I hope that the grace will be, as I grace you, I hope that I will be graced in return. I think that's maybe a play on words for the prayer, but I think any extension of grace to another person is a form of prayer.
Yeah, we're on Encounter today, and my guests are Jeff Kellam, Mark Kimpland, and Rachel Helgeson. And we've been talking about Thanksgiving and its importance in our life. And Jeff brought up a great point about grace and its relationship to those who are perhaps not feeling grateful this season, and how the church can extend its grace by being radically with someone. and walking with them in the midst of that, and being able to share with them the grace that we experience, and to make grace into a verb. I think that's a really great idea as to how grace becomes real and inside of the world around us. So, Mark, do you have any thoughts about
Yeah,
that?
I do. One of the things that I think that I've learned through this period of time, I am by nature an introvert. And so for me to relate one-on-one with someone is always been a challenge for me. I would much rather talk to a whole community of people. That I can do that.
Yeah.
The one-on-one thing. And what I was finding early on here with the masks and the social distancing and such things is that the danger is it can also give us an excuse not to be grace, to
Yeah.
cut things off. Yeah, I mean,
Oh.
they don't expect you to connect, those kinds of things. And this has taught me to go above and beyond. People who just stick their head in the door and say, hi, no, stop, let's connect. Those kinds of things.
So in our last minute, Rachel, do you have any last words of wisdom for people this Thanksgiving?
Really quick words.
Yeah, I think it's okay as we wrap up to consider how Thanksgiving bumps up against Christ the King Sunday, that Jesus is Lord, that Advent is about waiting, and that we, as we go onto the precipice of this time, our tables are big enough. And if you need help, that there is help in your local churches, through the Boone County Council of Churches. You can call 211 United Way. It's okay to ask for help, and we're here. Even your hosts, if you need to call one of us, retired pastors or currently serving pastors, that we can help you as well.
Well, I want to thank you all for being here and for showing me how many reasons there are to be grateful, even this year as we're approaching COVID. For all of you, I hope that you would be kind to each other and be a grace-filled community for others. Amen.